Namaste. Let us get started. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhed Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastwandhakaro Vai Rukarastvannivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururityapidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinau Vidhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namah Shivaya. So today is the concluding class of this Mandukya Upanishad and Karika, which we have been doing for a long time. Let's continue with our review of the summary of the review. So last time we had covered the key verse of the Mandukya, which is number 7, which started with Na antah pragyam na bahish pragyam. So we did that. So as you know, the structure of the Mandukya Upanishad is that the first verse of the Mandukya Om ityetad aksharam idagam sarvam is introducing the definition of the symbolic name of Ishvara, symbolic name of Brahma, called Om. So this is the definition of the Omkara Vichara. Okay, Omkara. Kara means the one which is called Om. So it's like quote unquote Om. So that's what's called Omkara. So the first verse was the introduction of the definition of Omkara. Then the second verse was the definition of Atma. And in fact, in doing so, it immediately equated Brahma, Brahman and Atma, saying that it really is the same thing. They are called from two different perspectives. Brahman called from a Jagat Karanam, the very cause of the entire cosmos, and the Atma called from the standpoint of your and my creation. Because we have a creation, we look at the world in a particular way. So that's called Atma. So this is what we called Jivatma and Paramatma. And really speaking, they are one and the same. So the Jivatma utilizes the Srishti that Paramatma has displayed. Now we should be careful in using the word displayed rather than created, because this is the ultimate aim of Mandukya. So the Srishti, the Ishvara Srishti and the Jiva Srishti follows the Ishvara Srishti. And just like the Srishti itself, the very display is really just a play, not really any reality. So similarly, our Srishti is also just a play, just exactly like a dream. And it kind of gives us some chance to transact, have some interesting transactions with the people, but then it disappears. And so this is the definition of the Atma and Brahma, which was the second verse. Then from the verse number 3 to 7, the Atma was explained in more detail. Ending with verse number 7, first starting with what it is not, and then culminating with what it is. So Jagrita Sthana, Bahishpragyaha, Swapna Sthana, Antahpragyaha, etc. All these things are defined, saying that this is really not the reality. And then culminating by saying Na Antahpragya, Na Bahishpragya, Na Advaitha Prakarna, etc. And positively talking about them, he says, Vyapadeshyam Ekatma Pratyaya Saram Prapancha Upashamam Shantam Shivam Advaitam Chaturtham Manyate. So that was the positive definition which we covered last week. So here in this positive definition, there are two words that are kept in mind as Gaudapadacharya ji expands that in the understanding of this very cryptic and very full of knowledge verse number 7. So as it expands through the kind of Karika, it utilizes two words as the very foundation of the explanation. The two words are Prapancha Upashamam and Advaitam. Prapancha Upashamam and Advaitam. And so, so I'll come to that in a minute, but let me finish the review of the Mandukya Upanishad itself, because Mandukya Upanishad still has 12 verses altogether, and first 7 we have now covered. So verses number 3 to 7 cover the Atma Vichara, the very analysis of the Atma and Brahman, both the same. This was number 3 to 7, ending with Nanta Pragya. Verses number 8 to 12 has the Vichara for Omkara. So it's an interesting placement. The first verse is Omkara definition. The second verse is second verse is Atma definition. Then 3 to 7 continues with the Atma definition. And number 8 to 12 goes back to the explanation of verse number 1, which is Omkara explanation, Omkara Vichara. So here it means that Om is an appropriate name for Brahman. An appropriate name. Appropriate name means that it's not just arbitrarily chosen. So this is what is in Sanskritam is called Vyutpatti Artha. Vyutpatti Artha. So for example, there are two types of reasons why a name is chosen. Any name. One is called Vyutpatti. Vyutpatti means etymologically correct. It should have some meaning for the essence of that word, which is called dhatu. So the dhatu means this is the essence of the word, and the word now explains the essence. So this is called Vyutpatti. The other one is called Rudhi. Rudhi artha means just by convention. And in fact, really speaking, if you look at most of the, like say, English words, they, I think, should be just called Rudhi. Like, for example, the world, son, S-U-N, wife, husband. These are by convention. So we need to give some names to all these entities, and so that we can all transact, and so this is called Rudhi. So in the case of, like for example, take the word Rama. So the Rama actually has both Vyutpatti artha as well as Rudhi artha. How? Vyutpatti artha means, it means that the word Rama must have an essence, and it does. So Rama come from the dhatu Ram, and Ram means to revel. Ramante asmin iti Rama. So whenever you and I have a joyful moment, when we have a ananda, when we are peaceful, that instance is represented with the word Rama. But the Rama is also Rudhi artha, because when we hear the name Rama, what comes to us is the husband of Sita, the son of Dasharatha. That's what comes to us. And that is by convention. That's immediately we are thought about this historical figure called Rama. So anyway, so this is the Vyutpatti artha and Rudhi artha. The word Om is Vyutpatti artha. Vyutpatti artha means that it means something. It is not an arbitrary name chosen so that we can conventionally use it for different things. No. It has a sense. What is the sense? The sense is, it is a complete, it's a symbol of completeness. What do you mean by completeness here? Completeness is exemplified by one day. Each day is a symbol of completeness, and the next day is a repetition of the completeness. So here we can bring in the very famous verse Purnamidaf Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avishishyate. Really, it's a symbol of Purnatvam, Anantatvam, Anantatvam. And the day is a symbol of that. So as a day, it's a complete one. How would we say that? Because it has three different experiences. So it has the waking experience, it has the dream experience, and it has the deep sleep experience. And each of the three experiences are nothing but the states of consciousness, which is Turiya. So the word Om represents these elements, if you may, aspects, if you may. We wouldn't say parts. They're not separate parts, but aspects of the completeness, which is represented by a complete day. The 24 hours is a very important thing in this manifestation. So therefore, just to keep this going, this is just a revision. I have a lot to cover today. The The word Om consists of 3 matras. First matra is A, and the A matra represents the waking experience. The second matra is U. That matra represents the dream experience. And the third matra is M. And that represents the deep sleep experience. These are the 3 matras. And all 3 matras reflect and arise from amatra, one which is not a matra. Why is it not a matra? Because it cannot be expressed in the same way as the other 3 matras. And that is the silent consciousness, turiya. So in the daily experience, so we have the and so really is nothing but a reflection of the basic consciousness. U is a different reflection of the same basic consciousness, and is the reflection, yet another reflection of the same basic consciousness. It is a reflection of the consciousness as the very basic aspect of all 3 remains the same. And it is silence. So the matras is, you can pronounce, you can manifest a sound, you can create a sound, ma. But it all comes out of silence and resolves into silence. So the silence, self-existing silence, and the very source of the manifestation, the Swayam Jyotihi, is silence. And then all these experiences come about. This is the Vyutpatti Artha of the word Om. And this is what is explained in verses number 8 through 12. And so then it is ending with the verse number 12. So we can read that. We don't have time to read all of them in specific. I'm sure you can refer to the notes if you want. But verse number 8 is Amatras Chaturthaha Avyavaharyaha Prapancha Upashamaha Shivaha Advaitaha Evam Omkaraha Atma Ev Samvishati Atmanam Yav Ev Samvishati Atmana Atmanam Ya Evam Veda. Without going into the details of the whole thing, but number 12 is the ending of Mandukya Upanishad, and this represents Amatraha. Amatraha means the Turiyaha, which cannot be expressed, because it is really, it's just like you cannot see it. Like you cannot see yourself, but you can also see yourself by your reflection in the mirror. And so the u, ma are reflections in the mirror. But reflections of what? Amatraha, Turiya, Atma, Brahman. All these. This is what the Omkara Vichara is. And there is a one-to-one correspondence between the segments of Atma and the matras of Omkara. Matrascha padaha, padascha matraha. So you can see this, the correspondence of them, that the waking state, which is called pada, is nothing but the matra and also for the other ones. And with one comment, this review of the Mandukya is now over, and we will now go into Karika. And that comment is that in the pronunciation of Om, it is not appropriate to pronounce these three segments separately, which is done by people. It's a mistake. They'll say Aum, Aum. Mistake. It should be pronounced as Om. Om, not Aum. And so the A, U and Ma is simply to reveal the Vyutpatti Artha. But as far as the pronunciation goes, and the recitation of the word Om is very sacred. And one should do that as much as possible. You can just say Om, Om. And if you do that, this is calling out the very Ishvara that is the basis of Om, which is the very manifest, from which the manifestation of Om comes, and also your own completeness. And if you pronounce it, if you recite it with meaning, with meaning means when you are reciting Om, in the back of your mind, you see the sheer significance of it. What is the significance? Because it is a name for the completeness of your completeness that you are. I was going to say completeness of you, which is wrong. There is no completeness without you. The very nature of completeness is the Atma. It's not like I am somebody and then I have completeness as a quality. No. This is the word Brahman. Brahman comes from the word Brih. Brih means very big. So the bigness is not a quality, it is the very Swarupa. It is a noun, not an adjective. So similarly here also, when you say Om, you are reminded of your completeness. So you are at that point when you are enunciating the word Om, you are not a waker, you are not Vishwa, you are Turiya. And so even in the pronunciation of Om, we should really be cognizant of the silence which is prevalent. Comes out of silence, goes back to the silence, and so your mind gets much more focused on the silence between Om. Anyway, this is the Mandukya Upanishad, and now we can have a review of the Karika. So the Karika, which is a very important work, really speaking. And don't take my word for it. I don't say it lightly. It is called important by all the wise acharyas of Vedanta. Karika is a very important verse, and I was going to say this later, but I might as well say it now. What I would recommend to you is, now that for those of you that have really stuck with me for this long explanation of Mandukya and Karika for the last, I don't know, I have to figure out, I think it's in at least a couple of years. For those of you that have stuck with me, what I would recommend is you set it aside for a while. Don't review it right away, but go back to it every 4 to 5 years. And you will see that it will have a new in-depth meaning for you every time you review it. And I say 4 to 5 years because, really speaking, the depth of the meaning to you depends very much on your own growth. So the same concepts that appeared interesting now, 4 or 5 years from now, it will become, wow, I can see that. This is the whole idea about the Brahma Asmi, not Asti. Then you wait for another 4 or 5 years and review it again. And by the way, this is what you should do for all of them, not for Mandukya. And I have a kind of like a way to depict this phenomena. You know, if you are climbing a hill and your goal is to reach the peak of the hill, and the hill is too steep, this is exactly what Vedanta is. Vedanta is a very steep hill. It's a very interesting hill in the sense that it is already done. You're already at the peak. It's not as though you have to do anything. But because in terms of understanding and having this sense of it applying to our lives, that I am in fact the very free person that I'm seeking, that understanding is a hill. And it's a steep hill. And not necessarily a steep hill, because all depends upon where you are in your life, who you were in your previous life. There are people for whom this is not a steep hill, that it becomes very instantaneous. But for many of us, it's a steep hill. That being the case, what I would recommend is that going and reviewing each of these texts every 4 to 5 years is like going around the hill on a less steep side. You would like circumambulating a hill. And every time 4 or 5 years come along, you are at a higher level. So you're starting with east facing, and then you slowly go to north, then west, and then south. And you come back to east again. By that time you have risen something. Your whole view is a little bit more encompassing. You do that 2 or 3 times, then you're at the hill. You're at the top of the hill. So my recommendation would be to, having completed it, please place it nicely in your library, your notes, the book, and then revisit it after a while. Then you will see, I can just tell you from my own experience, it just comes alive and makes your understanding clearer and clearer. Okay, so let's go into a brief review of the Karika in the next half hour, less than half hour. So Gaudapada Charyaji's Karika has, as you know, 4 chapters. So the first chapter, which consists of 29 verses, is intertwined with the Mandukya Upanishad. It's a very interesting thing. And also, before I complete that thought, the name of this chapter, each chapter is called Prakarna. This is called Agama Prakarna. Agama means the Vedas. The sayings of Vedanta in the Vedas, as part of the Vedas, is called Agama. There are different reasons why it is called Agama. Let's not go into that. But this Prakarna is called Agama Prakarna. The Agama Prakarna means that this is a Prakarna which explains exactly what the Mandukya is saying and is trying to convey. So this Prakarana is really just an explanation, just not an explanation but an expansion of the Mandukya. So in that sense it is intertwined. And the very interesting thing is that you don't start the Karika at the end of the Mandukya. It's kind of like, you put two strings together and then you extend it. And so it starts to even start even in the middle of the Mandukya. It doesn't wait for the end of Mandukya and then continues on for 29 verses. And so that is what the first chapter is all about. It's called Agama Prakaranam. Then the second chapter and the third chapter and the fourth chapter. Let's start with the fourth chapter. In the fourth chapter, there is no new information given. In the Alata Shanti Prakaranam, which we just finished a little while ago, 100 verses, it is a review and consolidation of what is presented up to that point. It's a review, it's a defense, and we'll go into that a bit more detail later on. So that's the fourth chapter. The second and the third chapters are the expansions of the two key words used in the 12th verse of the Mandukya. And those two words, as I mentioned before, is Prapancha Upashama, and the second one is called Advaitam. So the second chapter, I don't know if I said, I may have misdone it. So the first chapter is Agama Prakarna. The second verse, what am I saying? Second Prakarana, second chapter is about Prapancha Upashama. The third chapter is about Advaita. So going back to it, the second chapter is called Vaithatya Prakaranam. Vaithatyam is just a synonym for mithya. Vitataha. Vitataha means false. Appearing but false. It's called Vitataha. And Vaithatyam is the name of, is the quality of Vitata, means it is Vaithatyam. So therefore, the second chapter, Vaithatya Prakaranam, is establishing that the world's experiences, the world as an experience, is Vaithatya. Is Vaithatya. That is the goal and the purpose of the second chapter. And that chapter takes the dream experience as a fundamental part of the teaching. And one of the reasons it takes the dream example as a fundamental part of the teaching is because, as you know very well, that there are 3 ways to remove my doubts about something. I'm not sure about something, I have doubts about it, and to remove that doubt there are one of 3 ways. And not one of 3 ways, all 3 ways must come together. All 3 must be satisfied. What are those 3 things? In fact, let me be silent for a minute and have you think about it, if you can remember. Shruti, Yukti and Anubhava. If an error is there, it has to be pointed out by someone saying, "Are you looking at it like a snake? Oh, that's a mistake." And somebody has to say that very authoritatively. Authoritatively means that person sees it's not a snake. It's a rope and you are mistakenly taking it as a snake. This is called Shruti. So the Shruti is saying, are you taking yourself to be a samsari? Oh my God, what a mistake it is. It's not true. It's called Shruti. Then comes Yukti. Yukti means it has to tell you why it is not true, why it's a mistake. Rationally, because our minds being what it is, it only goes with what it sees at any one time. You cannot say this is something else because I don't see it that way. So I have to be convinced about it. So that convincing through rational thinking is called Yukti. But then comes Anubhava. Anubhava means because the doubt remains until you know this is really true. I can feel it. Here, in that sense, the dream example is an indication of Anubhava. So this is a chapter which relies very much on the dream experience to say, don't you see it? That it frightened you and it upset you and it goes away. Disappears completely without a trace. You might remember it for half a minute, maybe a minute or 2. You can't even remember that. Then you have to recall, oh, I had some kind of a bad dream. And the good part is nobody wants to listen to you anyway. So you also just dispose of it. So the dream experience is a very important aspect of this. And I think I've told you this many times. I certainly believe it. It is a specific manifestation of Ishvara to give us the final nail in the coffin of Ajnanam, which is Anubhava. Shruti, Yukti and Anubhava. So from there, what it is concluding in the second chapter is that it is not true. It is Vaithatyam. So here it means that So it just means that the experiences of my so-called this waking experience is basically mithya. Don't take it very seriously, and see. And the reason why I don't take it seriously is because I see it as real, and I'm just willing to go along with it. And it says no, go a step beyond, and that is the only way you are going to be completely happy. Because otherwise it will just take you for a ride, not only in this life but in the next few lives. There's no ending to it. Only when you really want to wake up. It's like, during one night we have many dreams. One dream is gone and a new dream comes up with a completely new setup altogether. New storyline. New plot. And then we keep going it, and finally we wake up. So this here also is no way of being independent from the scourge of the world without understanding that it is just a make-believe. It's just like a rubber scorpion. It looks like a scorpion, it feels like a scorpion, it is wet and black and frightens the heck out of me, but it is just a rubber scorpion. This is the message of the second chapter called Advaitha Prakarna. Okay. Then the third chapter is called Advaitha Prakarna. So the second chapter was an explanation of Prapancha Upashamam. So maybe I did not get enough time to do Prapancha Upashamam, but the Prapancha Upashamam means that the Prapancha means the manifestation of the world, and Upashama means that it has to be resolved. And it cannot be resolved until you see that it does not have an independent existence. This is called Prapancha Upashama. Now the third chapter is called Advaitha Prakarna. So the Advaitha Prakarna means, and here in the introduction to this chapter, all the acharyas, Swami Maheshananji, Swami Paramarthanandaji also all point out that, and this is the we rely on the misleading words of Buddhism to point out why this chapter number 3 is given. So please see this. So even the Buddhists say Vaithatyam, mithya. The word is nothing but just like a play of the mind. And we agree with that. We agree with that up to that point. But the Buddhists don't have a third chapter. They just leave it at that. They just leave it at that. We say that a mithya is dependent on satyam. In fact, Swami Dayananda used to say this. He says that a lot of people criticize Vedanta as mithyavada. You dismiss everything as mithya, 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 and you're not dealing with real problems. So we say we are dealing with real problems, but the only way to deal with real problems is to look at it as mithya. They say, oh, that's very easy to say. You just dismiss it and you've got your own philosophy. We say it's not philosophy, my friend. We are not mithyavada, we are satyavada. How can we say that we are satyavada? Because mithya relies on satyam. You cannot say ornaments without talking about gold. And so therefore, the third chapter is given, which is called Advaitha Prakarna. Advaitha Prakarna means now that we have at least broken the hold of the world by understanding that it is mithya, now we have to see what it really is. And this is Advaitam. And so there, Swami Paramarthananda said it here very nicely. He says, the problem is not the absence of Advaitam, because we don't understand what Advaitam is. Everything is duality and multiplicity, and it gives me problems. But in fact, I need to understand what Advaitam is. So I don't see an Advaitam anywhere. All I see is Dvaitam. And so the problem is not the absence of Advaitam, but the problem is the absence of Advaita Jnanam. So the experiences of the world is not a problem. Even though it is mixed up with dukkha, it's not all sukham, sukham, sukham. It is mixed up with dukkha, but it has a lot of sukham, a lot of enjoyment, a lot of variety, a lot of fun, disappointments, all those kinds of things are there. But it is just that I don't see all of it as Advaita. I am not able to see that it's a play. Play also has some good parts, bad parts. It makes you cry, makes you laugh, and so on. At the end, you come out and you just start looking at your iPhone and say, oh, that was fun. Now let's see what's going on in my life. It's gone. All the crying and laughing and so on. This is Advaitam. That you saw your experiences were nothing but a play. This is what needs to be done. How? So to look into Advaitam is the third chapter called Advaitha Prakarna. And so there, a very key part of that, and this is really the hallmark of the Gaudapadacharya. Hallmark. His contribution to this understanding is amazing. And that is what's called Ajativada. Ajativada means that understanding that this was never created. It always has been like this. And it will continue to be like this until you uncoil it. It's not as though it is a creation. It's not a creation. And here in this review of the third chapter, and then finally in the fourth chapter, he goes into defending why the Advaita Vada is really Ajativada. And so here Swami Paramarthananda has given these four. He's so good at doing this. He extracts certain concepts and principles and lays it out very clearly for us to understand. So he says that, Swami Paramarthananda says that four things are part of the Advaita Vada or Ajati Vada. Four things. One is the existence of the world is negated. The second one is the origination of the world is negated. The third is the appearance and experience of the world is accepted. And the fourth one is that the appearance is due to the power of Maya. These things, four kernels of truth should be kept in our mind as we approach our study and our life and so on. This is a very important thing. So here, Gaudapadacharya ji establishes that really speaking, there has been no real creation. It is just a manifestation. It's not going to, and it's going to continue until we see the Advaitam of it. That the Dvaita is not a real Dvaita, it is just an understanding, it's just an expression. There's no real difference between one wave of the other. It's all the same because they both consist of water alone. So this chapter that is devoted to understand the concept of Advaitam is what is called, the third chapter is called Advaitha Prakarna. And then the last Prakaranam, as I mentioned, is called Alata Shanti Prakaranam, 100 verses, and it brings in no new ideas, but it is in the form of Mananam and reviews and defends the very basic principles of Mandukya and also the earlier parts of the Karika. So here very quickly there are, I think we have done this before, verses number 1 through 27 are presented various theories of creation by different schools of thought. Asatkaryavada of Nyaya and Vaisheshika, Satkaryavada of Sankhya and Yoga, Brahmakaryavada of Vishishta Advaita, Karmakaryavada of the Karmakanda, Buddhists, all of those are taken up. Because even Swami Dayananda used to say that until you understand what people are objecting about clearly, you cannot create your own doubt. You cannot remove your own doubt. So you have to be a full representation of what they're saying. This is why we spend so much time on Purva Paksha. Because the Purva Paksha is not to put them down, but to put your own doubts down with saying, this is what they're saying, but don't you see that it is false? So doing that is verse number 1 through 27. Then in verse number 28 through 71, which is the main section of this, here verses number 1 through 27 was the schools of thought that are not Vedic. In verses number 28 to 71 is the doubts create within the Vedas themselves. That has to be understood, the wrong understanding. Because, in the Taittiriya Upanishad and Chandogya Upanishad and so on, a lot of that is being given about creation. So someone can say, the Vedas say there is creation, how can you say there is no creation? Gaudapadacharya says, listen, it is through a certain viewpoint. In the beginning you can say, yes, there is creation. But in the end, when you grow up, you find there is no creation. So that is just a stepping stone. All of that is talked about. Then verse number from 72 to 86, it points out that please see that once you accept creation as a reality, you are now caught. Like in a some kind of you just cannot get out. So don't even get into it. And then from 87 to 89, it summarizes the Mandukya Upanishad. Number 90 is a review of all the sadhanas, and number 91 through 100 is simply draws the overall conclusion. And so the fourth chapter, Advaitha Prakarna, of course, has a very good example of the incense stick in the dark, but it provides us nothing but a confirmation of what has already been taught. And with that, the Karika is over. And with that, our class is over. And I congratulate all of you that have been studying on this with me for so long. I'm very happy to be of some help to you in this matter. And I think this is a good foundation for your future study, as I mentioned before. And I urge you to treat this as perhaps one of the most important texts that you will be having in your library, and please study it again. And so with that, I conclude and with a ending prayer. Om asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So with that, this text is over, and as you know, we are not going to have a class next Saturday. And then when we regroup on Saturday the 5th of December, we will start the Brahma Sutra class, and you have all the information about that. And if you are still interested, you kindly go through the qualifications requested from me and fill it out. As you know, one of the qualifications I have requested is that you be a vegetarian. So vegetarianism is one of the manifestations of sattva guna. And so meat eating is tamasic and does not square well with the sattvic pursuit of all these texts, really speaking, but particularly of the most sacred text, which is the Brahma Sutra. So I'm requesting that you be a vegetarian. If you are otherwise very well qualified, and you may be, because of your own upbringing and so on, so this is true for some of the Western students and so on, then if you don't completely qualify, you kindly write to me and sort of explain. This has already been done by a couple of students, and I would request that if that's what's keeping you from enrolling, requesting an enrollment, then you kindly just explain that to me and let me consider it, and then we can have you. So at the moment we have 43 people that are enrolled in that class, and we will begin at 8 o'clock. 8 to 9:30, and the first 10-12 minutes will be for chanting both the dhyana shlokas as well as the Dakshinamurti stotram, and then we will have the explanation of Brahma Sutra, and then we will end with the last 5 verses of Dakshinamurti stotram. For those of you that know how to chant Dakshinamurti stotram, please revise it, and for others who don't know it, I will give you an audio version of it, and of course all the texts and so on. So with that, this class is over, and we'll transition into the next one. Hari Om. Let me see if you have any questions. Very good. I'm so happy that so many of you were so loyal to this text and stayed with it. And I find that as a real blessing, really, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. And it's good for me too to revise it in this obvious, in this obvious environment where discussion could take place. So I have a lot of thanks to you as well to be the students. So with that, I take your leave, and we will see you 2 weeks from now. Om.